Hi besties and welcome back to my trash channel. I haven't got much to say, but like I got unbanned from Wit, so that's proper yummy scrummy. Just enjoy the video besties. Love you all. Do you mind if I come with you? They ended up arranging to go to the cinema 2 days from then. The cinema was off campus and everyone except Sakuatsu agreed that it would be a nice experience to get out a little more. Though Atsumu just assumed that Sakuatsu was just tired because of class, and the thought that he had 3 more after the current one must have seemed daunting. Atsumu hummed and ruffled his hair, his left cheek puffing out as he thought. His chest was laid on his bed, his legs kicking forwards and backwards as he typed letters into his laptop, though he eventually tired from working his brain as he let out a low grunt. "Omi," he called, yet he received no reply and his one puffed out cheek was replaced with 2. "Omi." He called again but still got the same reply. Silence. He thought for a moment, sighing before he realized Sakuatsu was still out. He recalled Sakuatsu saying he had 2 more classes after their shared first one, which meant that Atsumu was home alone right now. He sighed once again. He wondered how Sakuatsu was holding up. He seemed pretty tired after their last class and he could just imagine the unimpressed look on the dark-haired male's face. Atsumu hummed as he dragged his body off of the bed, deciding that it would probably be a good idea to take a break from studying and writing his essay, at least for a short while. Plus he was also craving a coffee. His eyes scanned the area as he waddled out of his room, adjusting to the new temperature change as goosebumps surfaced his bare arms and exposed legs. It was extremely warm in his room, so this room felt rather cold in comparison. Cold and lonely. His lip pulled downwards. It was too quiet. Yeah, sure, he was the one usually making all the noise, but Sakuatsu was the one provoking him to be so loud. He missed him. He clicked his tongue and shook his head before he set off walking to the kitchen, where he grabbed the kettle and filled it up with water and clicked it on. His heart fluttered as he turned to the countertop and recalled his dream from last night. He imagined Sakuatsu hugging him right now, just as he did in his dream. Blood rushed to his cheeks, enhancing the pink shade from before into more of a red. Sakuatsu used to seem unlikely to even think about touching him, but now, Sakuatsu hugging him was far more likely. They even kissed, and in the moment, Atsumu wasn't sure if it was a dream or not. He'd had so many involving Sakuatsu in the past. The click of the kettle withdrew him from his thoughts. He didn't even notice he zoned out, nor did he know how much time had passed. But hey, at least he could make his coffee now. He hummed out of beat notes as he rotated around. He grabbed a mug and his coffee powder from the cupboard and added a spoonful of the powder into the mug before adding the boiling water. He sighed. Usually he would make Sakuatsu do this for him. Atsumu groaned for the 100th time. He was all alone and had nothing to do. He had no distractions. Atsumu guessed he did get distracted pretty easily. That was something Sakuatsu was right about, at least. Though his main distraction was Sakuatsu. He just couldn't seem to get the dark-haired dickhead out of his mind as of recently. He took a sip from his mug and sighed when he placed it down on the countertop, a solemn frown falling on his face. He decided that a change of environment was the motivation booster he needed to continue writing his essay. He had all the time in the world right now, with no one to bother. This was the perfect time to get it done. He strode towards his room, smacking his lips against one another as he picked up the things he needed. His notepad, pens, and his laptop. He should only need his laptop, but things would often randomly pop up in his head and he'd have to note them down or he'd forget them. He then walked back to the kitchen where he sat down on a stool, the countertop top front of him. He sighed. He couldn't exactly be bothered with writing right now, but he knew that last-minute writing would always stress him out, so it would be better to get his essay done now rather than later. He looked down to his notepad for a split moment, hoping to find some guidance on what to write next, yet instead both his mouth and his eyes widened. Taking notes didn't seem to be the only thing he was doing. He didn't even notice that he was drawing countless awfully drawn pictures of Sakuatsu. He was shocked to say the least, and his cheeks displayed that. Omi. The words fell out of his mouth despite knowing that Sakuatsu wasn't even home and no one was there to hear them. He shook his head as he looked down to give them some more attention. Was he really that whipped for him? So whipped that he could just draw pictures of him and not even realize what he was doing. He smiled to himself and just let the flusteredness take over his body as his face formed a tomato red shade. He imagined Sakuatsu next to him now, resting his head on his shoulder while Atsumu ran his fingers through his hair. He then imagined them on the couch cuddling, and then he imagined Sakuatsu's tired grumpy expression which formed into a smile as Atsumu placed a kiss on his cheek. His mind was running wild. He was down bad. He loved the bubbly feeling in his chest. He missed it so much, though it wasn't to stay long. He suddenly became aware of the silence in the room. His mouth fell into a frown. He didn't like it. He didn't like it at all. Sakuatsu wasn't there. There was no noise. He couldn't hear Kayumi's voice. He was alone. His lips were slightly parted and his eyes were wide. Why now of all times did he have to realize the truth? Couldn't he just be blinded by his growing feelings for at least a little longer? He just admitted that he knows he likes Sakuatsu, and a lot, but of course his brain had to remind him of reality. They were fake dating. They weren't actually dating, and of course that means that it would eventually have to come to an end. Once it's over, Sakuatsu won't hug him anymore. He won't flirt. He just won't be able to see this new and adoring side of Sakuatsu anymore, and he hated that. His breath got caught in his throat as he looked once again back to the notebooks. Various pictures of Kayumi's face still swarmed the paper in the exact same places as previously. He wasn't ready for it all to be over. He bit his lips and his cautious and nervous hands picked up the pen beside the book. Fuck his feelings for Sakuatsu. Fuck this whole situation. He was such an idiot. Of course he would go and catch feelings for Kayumi so easily. He wanted Sakuatsu. Now that he somewhat had him, he wanted him forever. Fuck. His voice trembled as his stiff fist quickly slotted two large and aggressive black lines from his pen across one of the numerous pictures of Kayumi's face. Sakuatsu had never liked anyone romantically, at least as far as he was aware, and he'd known him for a while. Sakuatsu liking him was a ridiculous idea that he didn't even want to consider. It would be unlikely. Very unlikely. He sat himself down on one of the kitchen stools where he tucked his legs up to his chest, his voice breaking a quiet "Omi" every so often. Fuck love. Fuck everything. He fell silent for a moment and paused the rocking movement of his body on the stool. Omi. How could he get over his feelings? He remembered Sakuatsu's advice from quite a long time ago. Maybe you should just try to move on. That's what he vaguely remembered, and it was clearly directed towards his feelings for Hinata. Who knew that he would subconsciously take his advice and get over his feelings by replacing them with his ones for Sakuatsu? Though maybe it wasn't too late to take the advice now, even if it wasn't for Hinata, and for Sakuatsu. He decided that he would try even harder to get closer to Hinata. He'd liked him in the past. He could always like him again, and maybe then he could get over his unreasonable and likely unreciprocated feelings towards Sakuatsu. Achu. Sakuatsu called as he walked into the dorm and kicked his shoes from his feet. He looked drained. He was drained. 4 classes in one day was way too much and was just glad to be back home. One thing that did brighten up his day was the familiar sound of footsteps becoming louder and louder as they neared him. He couldn't help but smile when he heard Atsumu's voice call his name. It was like music to his ears after the endless, boring talk from his professors. Omi. Hey Dumbus. He tiredly mumbled as he walked over to the beaming blonde. His hand patted Atsumu's fluffy hair before he pulled him into a hug, which was of course returned. Atsumu hummed joyfully as he rested his head over Sakuatsu's shoulder joyfully, his fingers playing with one another nervously as his arms looped around the dark-haired male's neck. How was class? Draining. But I'm back now. Then there was silence, though Sakuatsu didn't appear to be letting go anytime soon. If anything, he seemed to cling on tighter to him, probably about to fall asleep. But it was then when Atsumu's eyes widened. He frowned. Fuck. What were they doing? It wasn't like anyone was looking. Sakuatsu didn't have to act so loving towards him. Atsumu's mind wanted to push Kayumi away, but his heart ached to care for him longer. The feeling of Sakuatsu's arms around him was so addicting. He quickly flushed before his arms too tightened around Sakuatsu. The dark-haired male was clearly tired. He had to take care of him now, right? Omi, hurry up. We're gonna be late if you keep slacking. Jeez. Okay. Calm down. I'm here. Sakuatsu finally appeared from his bedroom, yawning as he walked towards Atsumu, who was standing by the door, his arms crossed sternly as he made sure Sakuatsu knew that he was being an inconvenience. We're gonna be late. You already said that. So, I'm the one who had to wake Dumbus up. You woke me up like 2 hours ago. Yet somehow you're still late. I'm not late. Well, we should have left like 5 minutes ago. Rolling his eyes, Sakuatsu bent down to grab his shoes, which he quickly slotted onto his feet before sighing. Atsumu must be excited or something. They agreed to meet at movie theater at 5 p.m., which was still an hour from now, meaning they still had plenty of time to get there. Achu were fine. We don't need to be in a rush. Well, we gotta get there. Yeah, the one marking us late cause you slept so long. You were still in bed at 2 p.m. Yeah, weird. Believe it or not, while you were sleeping I had a class this morning. I just decided to go back to sleep after it. Atsumu huffed, quickly latching his hand on the door handle and pushing the door open. He subconsciously puffed his cheek out and gestured for Sakuatsu to walk out, which he did, yet not before he swiftly grabbed the blonde's hand. Atsumu's cheeks quickly glowed a bright red. Oh Omi, shut up. We're going to be late, aren't we? Atsumu felt his throat get caught in his throat after hearing Sakuatsu say his own line after him, but it wasn't like he had much to say in return, so instead he scoffed and let Sakuatsu practically drag him by his hand. Neither of them exactly made it clear as to how they were going to get to the movie theater, yet Atsumu just assumed it would either be by bus or train. They didn't exactly have a nearby bus route, so it was more than likely to be by train. Not that Sakuatsu would be happy with either of those methods of transport. Atsumu stared almost too obviously at his and Kiyumi's interlocked fingers. An overjoyed and loving glow completely surrounded him, as if nothing but he and Sakuatsu mattered in that moment. Well, that was until he tapped back into reality as he shook his head. This time he frowned at his and Kiyumi's conjoined hands. He just couldn't seem to get his head around why Sakuatsu was holding his hand. It wasn't like there was anyone around, and Hinata definitely wasn't in the area. He just couldn't pull away. Ugh. Omi, we're early. You made us set off early. Stop complaining. I'm not complainin'. It was just an observation. A hand soft reached to lace around Atsumu's once more. Sakuatsu then began to walk, dragging himself and Atsumu further into the movie theater, and once again, Atsumu was left to wonder why. Sakuatsu didn't plan on staying outside forever. It was winter, meaning it would get cold and dark quickly. Both he and Atsumu had forgotten their coats like complete idiots. Let's go get tickets. Might as well do something while we wait. We aren't that early. Yeah, only by like half an hour. I don't see the problem honestly. Sakuatsu's footsteps stopped as they reached the front desk, which, as a result, forcefully made Atsumu stop too. He was about to whine about Sakuatsu stopping so suddenly, but then he saw the dark-haired male's face. It looked worried, which of course provoked an anxious feeling in Atsumu's gut too. His brain thought of multiple reasons as to why Sakuatsu could be feeling so uneasy, and he settled on the most obvious one. Luckily, no one was there to take their order quite yet. Therefore Atsumu had some time to comfort Kiyumi. His hand once holding Sakuatsu's own trailed up Sakuatsu's right arm, which he hugged tightly. His thumb pacing reassuring brushes up his length. It was extremely noisy in the large room. Voices echoed off of the four walls, and it took Atsumu a couple moments to realize that it was the loudness that was making Kiyumi feel so anxious. Mostly because he never had issues of his own when it came to noise. Sakuatsu was always used to the quiet, but he didn't seem to mind when Atsumu would talk his ear off. Though Atsumu had never seen the latter out in a public place like this before. Sure, he could go to the store on his own and he'd be completely fine. But now, he was extremely far away from home, and the room was far louder than what he had experienced for a long time. Atsumu's constant reassurance seemed to be helping him, at least a bit, and suddenly Atsumu was more thankful that they came in the evening. The large amount of noise would probably calm down soon, and fast. The theater was mainly filled with children with their parents, so they'd probably be going home soon. He couldn't imagine how loud it could have gotten if they came even earlier in the day. What do ya wanna watch? I don't know. Atsumu leaned to his side to rest his head onto Kiyumi's shoulder. He smiled, but then blood rose to his cheeks when he felt the latter rest his head on top of his own. Why ya haven't been to the theaters in ages? You gotta pick. You haven't either, Dumbus. Well, I'm indecisive. Sakuatsu freed his arm from Atsumu's tight grip and replaced it by looping it around the blonde's neck instead, his tense hands gripping at the edges of Atsumu's sweatshirt tightly. Well, I don't know either. Then we're doomed. A bit dramatic, don't you think? Just, what do we do then, Omi? Let's just wait for the both of them to arrive. Sakusa spoke as he took a few steps backwards and coached Atsumu to follow on with him. But that will be ages. I don't wanna wait. That's not my fault, is it? You're the one who wanted to get here so early. Shut up, Omi. They were now walking back towards the exit of the theater, hand in hand once again, and a smile on both of their faces as the loud noise became quieter and quieter by each step. What do we do then? Atsumu huffed as they walked out the building to rest on the nearby wall. Sakusa was standing just in front of him, clicking his tongue while deep in thought, thinking about what they should do to kill some time. Yet somehow, in Atsumu's adoring eyes, he appeared to be glowing. His every feature was just too gorgeous to handle. He smiled to himself. His hand was practically begging to hold the left side of his perfect skin, but instead he shook his head, trying to remove any fictional ideals from his mind. There was an arcade. We could go there. Giddily, Atsumu nodded and quickly grabbed Kayumi's hand in a rush, pulling him in the direction he assumed the arcade was in. Yet he was of course extremely wrong in his directions. Fine. But yeah, pay in. Omi, get the yellow one. Atsumu ordered whilst his arms squeezed a black bunny plushie between his arm, his other pointing on the glass, directing Kayumi towards the single yellow bunny towards the back of the claw machine. Actually, you know these things are like rigged, right? No. Yeah, just bad. They're clearly based on pure skill. Plus you already got this one. It can't be so hard to get another one. This time he pointed to the bunny in his arms, shaking his head disapprovingly when Sakusa rolled his eyes before focusing back on the machine in front of him. He had gotten the black bunny first try, and now Atsumu was suddenly convinced that Kayumi could get the rest of them, even after around 10 unrewarded attempts. He pressed the button next to the joystick and watched as the claw dipped down on top of the single yellow bunny, its nails tensing around the body of it. Sakusa chuckled. He couldn't help but notice Atsumu's excited expression and his nose that was practically pressed up against the glass. To both of their surprise, the claw actually did what it was meant to do, picking up the bunny and dropping it down into the award part of the machine. Atsumu almost squealed as he bent down and shoved his hand into the flap, quickly pulling the bunny out and showing the duo plushies he now had to Sakusa. Look at them, Omi. They are so cute. Sakusa smiled softly as he traced a hand over the blonde one and was surprised at how fluffy it was. Way more fluffy than it looked. See, I knew you could get them. Yeah, it only took like 15 tries. Shut up, Omi. We've got them now. Just look how cute they are. Sakusa hummed as he looked down at them. Yeah, they were cute, but still probably not with the money he spent on them. Yet he still couldn't help petting their fluff. They became more and more adorable the more he looked at them, much like Atsumu's current expression that he couldn't help but adore. Kayumi was about to say something, yet he was cut off by the sound of Atsumu's phone buzzing and the blonde's attention quickly focused on it. He pouted as he pulled his phone from his pocket and allowed Sakusa to take one of the bunnies from him to allow himself a free hand. The yellow one. Atsumu clicked his tongue as he read the notification on his screen. It was Shoyo. He then looked at the time. 4:58. Hinata had messaged him to tell Atsumu that he had arrived. Atsumu hummed. They should probably head back to the theater. It wasn't a far distance away. A 2-minute walk at best. He peeped up at Kayumi once more to tell him they needed to leave, but his voice was caught in his throat, a pink dust coating his burning cheeks. Kayumi, a blunt, mean, everyone hating dickhead, was playing with a cute little yellow bunny, and Atsumu found it clear to say that it was probably the most adorable thing he had ever seen. Taking the moment to treasure this fragile moment, Atsumu decided to stare a little longer, but he eventually had to shake it off. It looks like you. The bunny. It looks like you. What? Kayumi grinned. A mirror of Atsumu's cheeks printed on his own as he held the bunny just beside Atsumu's face. He let out a cherishable short breath and smiled a second time. See, just like you. It looks nothing like me. What are you on about? What are you on about? You look the same. And here I was thinking you looked like your brother, but this bunny is a complete match. Me and Samu are twins. Stop comparing me to a bunny, would ya? He quickly grabbed the bunny from Sakusa's hand, huffing as he drew both the yellow one and the black one to his chest. He gazed down at them both. Fuck his feelings for Sakusa. He was going to speak, but then he realized they needed to get to the theater. And now, Omi, we need to go. What? Atsumu hooked his arm around Sakusa's, since he didn't have a free hand to grab Kiyumi's with, and dragged him towards the exit of the arcade. But Sakuatsu soon matched his walking pace. Atsumu. Kiyumi. Hey. Hinata half shouted as both Atsumu and Sakuatsu walked hand in hand into the building. Shoyo was stood beside Rose, who gave the pair a small wave before she too spoke up. Hey you guys. Here. How long have you been here for? Not long. Only since I messaged you. I'm glad I didn't keep you waiting long then. He grinned as he swayed his and Kiyumi's hands forwards and backwards, almost like a child. Though he mostly did it to try and reassure Kiyumi everything was okay, though he wasn't sure if his method actually worked or not. Sakuatsu did seem to have settled down a little bit, and Atsumu's assumption was correct. The theater was much clearer and quieter than what it was earlier. This idiot got us here way too early. HAA. No. Really? What time did you guys get here then? I don't even know, but it was way too early. We went to the arcade to waste time. Sorry for keeping you waiting then, I guess. Hinata chuckled, his hand slipping into his pocket. It was Atsumu's fault. Always blame him. HAA. What? No. It was your fault. How was it my fault? You woke up late. Wouldn't that make us late then? Atsumu huffed and rolled his eyes as he turned away from Kiyumi, taking a single step the opposite direction from him. Yet he still refused to remove his locked hands. A small laugh could be heard from just beside Hinata, which they all looked towards. Rose's hand hovered over her mouth as if she was trying to disguise her face. It was something all three of them had witnessed before. Some people covered their faces with their hands when they laughed, and Atsumu never really understood why. He never did it after all, and there was nothing shameful about laughing. What movie do you guys want to watch? I'm not sure. Me and Omi couldn't decide on one earlier. Atsumu pouted as he slowly began to walk back in place beside Kiyumi. The dark-haired male's free hand rested on the blonde's waist. Atsumu instantly smiled. He couldn't help but look Hinata's way to see what reaction they had just provoked. I'm not sure either. I'm not really up to date on new movies. I kinda just watch Netflix. Don't we all? Atsumu let out a breath combined with some sort of a laugh. They all looked Hinata's way as he began to talk. There was a clear laughing presence within his tone. Let's just pick something random then. If Atsumu was to be honest, he had no clue what he was watching. The plot didn't even make sense. Or maybe he was just too dumb to make sense of it. The point being that it was just hard to watch. Occasionally, Atsumu would nod his head, as if he was actually understanding what was happening and taking the information in. But that was from the truth. And Sakuatsu could tell as he let out a scoff each time he saw the blonde do it. Atsumu just shoveled handfuls of the large popcorn bag he and Kiyumi had decided to share into his mouth, hoping it would help the bored feeling that was practically taking over him. He threw his body back on the chair, his head turned slightly to the side. Kiyumi looked just as confused and bored as he did, so it wasn't a surprise to him when Sakuatsu eventually noticed his stares. He mouthed a questioning what in his direction. I don't get it. Atsumu whispered. It was practically inaudible since his voice was completely overruled by the noises the movie was making. Though Sakuatsu didn't have to hear what he was saying to understand him. He laughed as he too rested his back flat against the seat, his head instead focusing on Atsumu's features instead of the movie in front of them. It didn't make sense whatsoever. He wasn't exactly sure how it managed to get in theaters in the first place. I can tell. They both snuggled closer to one another until they were barely apart and could actually hear each other over the obnoxious and intruding speakers that were practically making them go deaf. Are those two actually enjoying this? Sakuatsu looked away from Atsumu's face for a split moment, looking behind him to see what the other two members of their group were doing. Kiyumi's eyes furrowed inwards as he quickly turned back to Atsumu. He's staring at you. What? Hinata. He's staring at you. At us. Sakuatsu peeked for another quick glance. He sighed before he turned back to Atsumu again. I think he noticed me looking. Why is he staring at me? He's jealous, of course. A hand raised to cup the side of Atsumu's face, which Sakuatsu scoffed whilst doing. His thumb caressed the side of Atsumu's reddening cheeks softly as his eyes grew wider and wider. Oh, you happy he's jealous? What? You're blushing. Atsumu shook his head. Yeah, that was definitely the reason he was blushing. Shut up. Hinata was staring at him and he liked it. That's what he told himself at least. Despite knowing the truth. He knew most. If not all of his feelings for 𝘴𝘬𝘬 had faded by now, it would take something drastic for feelings to be sparked once again. He had a new focus now. Kayumi, I'm going to the bathroom. You want me to grab you anything? HAA. Food-wise dumbus. You want any sweets? Atsumu hummed, sitting up as straight as he could as he watched Sakuatsu shuffle in his seat until he was fully stood up. Get me a slushie. Sakuatsu nodded, grabbing his backpack that was placed on the floor and looping it over his shoulders as he walked towards the exit. He needed the toilet, but he also knew with how much food Atsumu was currently eating he'd run out soon enough, and he couldn't be bothered with him whining in his ear. Atsumu sighed, slouching back down in his seat where he rested his head on his hand. His eyes examined the bare seat beside him. Sakuatsu wasn't sat in it anymore, so it wasn't exactly his seat. His guts turned as his free hand gripped the fabric of his pants tightly as his mind wandered to his thoughts from the previous morning. What was the point of it all anymore? Atsumu had fallen out of love with Hinata. He didn't want him anymore. So what was the point? What was the point in all this fake dating shit? He was sure Sakuatsu would be glad to finally be out of it. The point of it was that he just couldn't manage to let it go. Sakuatsu was still convinced that he still had feelings for 𝘴𝘬𝘬, at least to Atsumu's knowledge. So they could continue charade until Kayumi found out about his fake feelings for Hinata. He didn't want to let Kayumi go. He couldn't. But it's still so selfish of him. He couldn't keep Kayumi to himself forever, and something about that thought tightened his throat as he gulped a shallow breath. He wanted Sakuatsu, but he couldn't have him. Sure, he had him for now, but it wasn't going to last forever. He hated that. He wanted Sakuatsu. He wanted him forever. For as long as he wanted him. He wanted Sakuatsu to come home and willingly hug him and press kisses on his forehead. He wanted Kayumi, but he wanted the genuine Kayumi, the one who wanted him back. But that would be an unrealistic stretch. He didn't want to be left without him, but he also wanted more. It was nice now, how things currently were, but he just wanted Sakuatsu to love him without the pressure of fake dating. Oh, how amazing things would be if they were actually dating, and if Sakuatsu did already love him and would kiss him without a second thought. But there's no point in developing something that would just end up ending. He felt guilty for keeping Kayumi to himself, yet the guilt couldn't even come close to defeating his feelings that grew strong with each moment. For Sakuatsu, he'd rather things would just stay how they were for now than to completely destroy what they had made. So maybe he could keep on deceiving Sakuatsu, at least for a little longer. Tsumu. The voice broke him from his thoughts as he quickly turned in the direction of the call. Yeah, are you okay? Atsumu bit his lip before he responded, nodding. Of course. Why? You're crying. End of part 7. Red Heart. Hi besties. I hope you enjoyed the video. I just wanna ask if you preferred the writing style of this part or if you like the other one better. I think I wrote in more paragraphs this time and there was less speech. I don't know. I really wished I put more speech in now that I'm looking back on it, but like it's too late for that. Still, I hope you enjoyed this part. I think I'm going to try and make paragraphs shorter and add more speech, but like I don't know yet. It depends on what you guys prefer. But anyways, I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye besties.